Welcome into the Draft Lab, a weekly series here for Pushing the Pile on the CBS Sports Network, where we dive into 2025 NFL draft prospects and we go position by position. We've done quarterbacks, we've done wide receivers, we're hitting running backs today. And I thought there was no one better to have on than none other than Emory Hunt, former college football running back for the University of Louisiana, F-ball game plan on X. Emory, I want to talk about this running back class because I think it's insanely good. This is one of the best classes I've seen since probably 2018, where we saw three guys go in the first round. I believe eight guys go in the top 75. I want to hear your thoughts on it, though. How good is this class?
Mike, it's a fantastic class, man. It reminds me a lot of the class that had the Leonard Fournette, Christian McCaffrey, Aaron Jones, Tariq Cohen was one of those guys in there. Kareem Hunt. You had a ton of good backs. So when we're talking about backs, and I know a lot of fans tend to be focused on the first round and think the draft is over after the first 32 picks, but you can find backs literally. Now, this is when the statement actually rings true. You can find backs later in the draft that can help you out. So don't get caught up in who goes in round one or where guys may have certain backs ranked, because this is a deep and talented running back class.
Truly is. I made the cut to top 10. You saw the list there on your screen, and I was like, the guys I am leaving out, I would have been raving about in last year's class because last year it just didn't have the depth. You were looking there at the end of the third round, and you're like, I'm not sure if there's a starter going to be had here at this point. It just was not the same amount of talent. This year is going to be a different animal. They're going to come off the board early. There's going to be a ton of them. And even still into the late third, early fourth, into day three, I think you're still going to be capable of finding starters. So let's go through my top 10. I'll break it down a little bit, and then you give me your reactions. Who's going to be too high, who's going to be too low, and who's going to be just right. So at number one, no debate here. I'd be floored if anyone had anyone other than this guy. I haven't seen a ranking that did, but we haven't gotten to yours, so maybe you will. But Ashton Jeanty of the Boise State Broncos, he comes in at number one. After that, though, all bets are off. Number two, I've seen all over the place. I have Dylan Sampson of Tennessee. I just think he is an all-around awesome back, almost 1,500 yards this past year for Tennessee in his first year as starter, 22 touchdowns, and he's the youngest player in this class of running backs, only 20 years old, won't turn 21 until next season. Omarion Hampton at three, the UNC running back, a potential first-rounder, a lot of love for this guy, one of the hardest runners in the entire draft class. Quinshon Judkins at four, the Ohio State back, the other Ohio State back, the transfer from Ole Miss. I have Cam Scadaboo at five. Scadaboo, excuse me. I butchered it last week. It's Scadaboo. David Martinez from Miami at six. Yet another transfer. He went from Oregon State to Miami, and I loved his tape this past year. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, this is one of my under-the-radar guys in this draft class. Didn't get to play this year with eligibility issues after week one, but he has some of the best footwork in this draft class, some of the best run pacing in this draft class, and he went down to the Shrine Bowl and won the MVP there for the week he had in practice. RJ Harvey from UCF comes in at number eight, one of the stars of the combine, a former quarterback turned running back, and has some of the best tape of any running back in this class. Travion Henderson, the big play home run threat that's been a mainstay for the Ohio State Buckeyes the last 4 years, comes in at number nine. And then Jordan James, Bucky Irving's replacement there at Oregon, a guy who's young himself, a junior coming out, still only 20 years old. There's my top 10. Emory, who's too high? Who did I get wrong here?
Well, I wouldn't say, there's a lot of your list that I kind of agree with. And, if we're moving guys around, like, you won't get an argument out of me for a couple of guys, right? I'm not as high on Judkins in terms of he's my RB10, but he's your RB4. No real difference there for me. I'm not going to argue that. Same with Scadaboo. I had him as RB9. You have him as RB5. That's not a problem. I'm kind of with you on Martinez. Wherever you put him within the top 10, he is a top 10 back. So those are, and obviously Hampton, I would have two. Jeanty, you have one. Even though I think there's a conversation I had about one, but Jeanty is my RB1 by a smidge, although Hampton is outstanding in his own right. So those are, I agree with. Those are not the problem. I would probably flip-flop Henderson, Judkins. I have Henderson higher than Judkins, but the one that I want to ask you more about is Jordan James. Because for me, I worry a little bit about his contact balance. I feel like now it's a good trait to have, but it's also could be the gift and the curse. Like, he runs very light on his feet, which is great when you're accelerating out your cut. making somebody miss, exploding through a gap, but it also leaves you, opportunities to get tipped over. And I think he does get clipped down a lot. Running through contact is where he has to get better. So I think his contact balance is a little bit questionable. So why are you having him at 10? Because again, I respect it because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
people forgot how good he was at Oregon, how good he ran this season.
And I thought he was great last year, even just spelling Bucky Irving there in that Oregon offense. But to me, he's the kind of back I go for. I like shorter, squattier backs who have the ability to get between different holes. And I think you see behind the line of scrimmage, he's very gifted at getting in and out of, he's attacking, say, frontside B gap, getting to backside B gap without any wasted movement, without any stopping of the feet, anything like that. So he's got that real low center of balance that helps him change directions really well. And I think him compared to a lot of the backs that are kind of in that tier, because I do think like once I got to 9, I was like, all right, there's not really any backs I love at this point. There's a lot of guys I think can be starters, but that's kind of those 9 I like really, really like in this draft class. And after that, there was a lot of names I considered. But with James, it's just the consistent hard-nosed running style. I think you can trust to execute the concept well. A lot of guys in this draft class are either, you have some guys who are former wide receivers turned running backs who kind of look like that when they have to, change points of attack in the run game. Whereas James, he is very adept at getting to basically the correct read in whatever concept it is and getting there efficiently. So I go for backs like that. Obviously, I think his like ceiling is limited compared to some other guys in this draft class because he's not the athlete. Because you mentioned he does not have the contact balance. He does not have the make you miss out in space that you would prefer. But I think he's just a very safe back that once you get him to the next level, you'll be able to rely on him. Guy didn't fumble, I don't think, once in his entire collegiate football career. To me, that still holds a little weight. So that's why I went for Jordan James there, right at the back end of my top 10.
And the other one I just had a concern with was not because he's not a good player, obviously. And I want to say for the fans out there, when we do rankings, it's a ranking, but it's not the actual grade because you may have a bunch of guys that are graded the same, but you just kind of have to rank them.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like you might have 10 guys that have the same number grade, but it may say, oh, you got him RB 45. Like, nah, they're the same grade as RB 10. It's just so many guys stacked. But Dylan Sampson, listen, and this is the issue I had. Maybe this was part of the issue I had with guys of this era. When I remember the one guy I had an issue with because of this, what I'm about to lay out, was the running back from Texas. Big fan of, all I heard was, oh, this guy's the greatest high school running back ever. And my homeboy told me, go watch this film and let me know what you think. He didn't preface it or anything. I watched the film. I was like, man, he's running through gaping holes. Like he hadn't had to create. And, and his back ends up going to the University of Texas. And then boom, the other guy that was in the same class ends up being better than him and goes on to being a pro. But with Sampson, I worry about his vision. I think his vision is okay because of the offense. He's running through gaping holes, but he does have the balance. He does have the acceleration. I worry about his vision and ability to create at the pro level.
Yeah, and with that Tennessee offense, I think you hit the nail on the head that it's not ideal in terms of preparing guys. I think that's one thing we'll touch on maybe a little bit in the next block when we talk about what we look for when scouting running backs. I like to see running backs play one NFL run concepts, what you're going to like 2 tight end sets, things of that nature, where it's like the stuff you'll have to do at the NFL level, because it is different than running like 1 back power with 4 wide receivers every play. Like sometimes you'll get in that Tennessee offense where it's just like comically like boxes, running pretty much gap only or inside zone only. It's like you just have such a limited sort of skill set to project to the next level, what that's going to look like when he's actually asked to do NFL things. So that's part, like, I do worry about that. And that, to me, that is his biggest worry, in my opinion. But I love guys with his skill set. Again, the ability to bounce. He is so shifty and so tuned up that just once he sees a crease, he is able to hit it so much with so much more speed than say a guy like Cam Scadabo, who's I have number 5 in this list, or even a Damian Martinez. Like it's just a different level of acceleration. And on an NFL football field, just the running back position in general, there's so few times where we really get out in space. A lot of times it's just this real short area burst. That's all that matters is how quickly can you cover 4 yards? It's not 40 yards. It's that 4 yard burst. And with him, when he got a crease, he hit it harder or as hard and as quickly as anyone in this draft class, in my opinion. So that's why I had him at number 2.
It's funny because a lot of what you're saying is a lot of what people used to have issue with back in the day. I say back in the day, but this was like in the 90s, where these option backs, guys that came out of Colorado, guys that came out of Nebraska, people say, oh, you can't trust these backs in the NFL because everything's already open for them on the option pitch, until the one guy that breaks the mold and got people to look at it differently. And Ahman Green was different than the Lawrence Phillips, was different than all those other I backs that came out of Nebraska. I know people bring up the late, great Rashaan Salam, but then you had other backs that thrived at the NFL level out of that same system. Eric Bieniemy was one of them. But a lot of times, like you're saying, you can separate the player from the scheme. And that's what I hope a lot of fans do when they look at a lot of these backs that you're mentioning throughout this whole show.